you very much. It's nice to be here, good crowd. I'm going to talk about a few little things. So I wanted to talk a bit about some of the things that I think help sustain a buzz in a community around tech and creative hubs, just to sort of set the scene really for the sort of things that Sarah's going to talk about and the news we're going to hear about the Kiln. And I also wanted to do that in respect to the local area as well, so what's happening in Worcestershire and what's happening and what I'm involved with in Malvern. So I've got a few slides. Anybody know, so we've got a guesswork first, what's this? It's a famous shed, yes. HP's shed. So this is where Hewlett and Packard set out to develop what has now become, of course, HP, and they did this in what has now become Silicon Valley. So of course they're only a tiny, tiny bit of what has become a very large area, and everybody, as you travel around the world, aspires to create the next Silicon Valley. So you hear it all the time, you know, in Edinburgh, in Malvern even, with the Cyber Valley, and in other countries. They're all trying to do this. Now this is, if you've ever been there, it's big, as you can see on here. There's lots of companies. It's not a little microcosm where you can go to Silicon Valley and meet everybody. It's hundreds of miles in length. And it's populated by lots and lots of companies, of course. But of course, to get there, you've always got to have something to start it. So the kind of message here, I think, as you embark on what the Kiln wants to do and what you want to achieve, is at least the Kiln is making a start. There's obviously other initiatives, but the Kiln could be the catalyst to Worcestershire's equivalent of Silicon Valley. Okay, anybody want to guess where this is? This is a harder one. So this is, you can read it, maybe, Atlas Computer Centre, or Atlas Computer Laboratory. So that's down at Harwell, south of Oxford, and is where the Janet, the academic network, the internet for the UK, was first put together and rolled out, and where some of the initial computer work was done. Nowadays, it's a massive centre of science and technology, underpinned now, particularly by the Diamond Light Source, the synchrotron, which is a very distinctive building you can see there. But there was a lot going on before that. It's actually where the UK's atomic energy was researched, and the atomic weapons establishment was partly operating from. And so in a region like that, you have a heritage of stuff that's been going on for some time that's helping to build out what you want to do. So again, if you look at what you want to achieve in Worcestershire and how the Kiln could help, of course I think one of the things you need to do is look around at the heritage that's here already, what's been going on in Worcestershire that you can build on to take it forward. And even the seemingly non-tech things like the pottery industry, of course, is really creative and can be used as this sort of heritage and this anchor to go forward. Okay, next guess, where's this?
Is it MIT?
No.
That's the city, right?
No, so this is Singapore. It's called the Biopolis, and Singapore had a different approach to dealing with this issue. They are a relatively well-off nation, and so they threw money at the problem. And they created, in this case, the Biopolis, which is a centre of biotech research institutes. And I was fortunate enough to have an office just up here in a biotech incubator that was set up. And so I saw this thing grow, and it was really underpinned by, we don't really have them in the UK, but they're institutes that are linked with academia and industry, a bit like a Max Planck Institute in Germany. And those were what really were accommodated in here. And the idea was to build out high-tech capability with an academic and then an applied science thing. And despite spending a lot of money creating that was the Biopolis, they then went on to do the Fusionopolis, and then they've done the Mediapolis and others. Block 71 is the place where all the entrepreneurs ended up. So this block was destined to be pulled down because it was in the wrong place. It's an old industrial business unit in land that needs to be developed. In Singapore, land is developed very quickly. But what happened is entrepreneurs started to populate Block 71, sort of 500 metres from the Fusionopolis and Mediapolis and so on, because they couldn't afford to be in these glitzy places, and they could afford to be in here because it was being vacated as it was being empty, ready for demolition. And then the Singapore government realised that actually they better not pull it down. So I think it's still there. They may have, over the last year, pulled it down and changed. But there's a really vibrant high-tech startup community in this block, leveraging all the stuff that's going on around it. The INSEAD business school Asian campus is literally opposite as well. So despite all the money, it turns out that you can, with a bit of serendipity, start something. And again, I think that's the message as well, is you don't have to have lots of money to start something. Obviously you do need money to sustain stuff, but it's not the only thing you need. Sarah will probably tell us where this is.
Silicon Roundabout.
It's Silicon
Not
Roundabout.
everyone calls it that anymore, but you know, the press loves that.
So I wanted to show you this. Sarah may mention a little bit more about it in a minute. And then that one.
Canada Square?
Yeah, so level 39, some of you may have heard, is sort of a fintech centre. I put Pool there because this is another thing. It's kind of, there was a need for entrepreneurs and innovators to have somewhere to be based. And the bohemian creatives decided that the sort of Silicon Roundabout area was cheap enough and trendy enough to start putting stuff together, and gravitated and coalesced around there. Level 39, glitzy, quite expensive, I suspect, probably subsidised. But the point there is that it's the rest of the layers are all banks and technology, sort of banking technology companies, financial institutions, and what they wanted was a sort of a glimpse of new technology as it comes on, cryptocurrencies and blockchain and so forth, cybersecurity. And so level 39 is that little incubator space where startups can plug in, and they've got a whole floor, a whole skyscraper of customers potentially that they can go up and down and meet during the day. So it's another interesting space that's sort of starting. So the message really is, despite all of that, I think what you actually need, of course, is the ecosystem. So I've got a lovely picture of an ecosystem here. And so I thought, well, okay, what can you put around all of this to make sense for what we're talking about? So here we go. Little minnows, or tadpoles, of course, the entrepreneurs. In an ecosystem like this, bigger things tend to eat smaller things. But in the entrepreneur's land, what you have to do is think about it as an opportunity. So when the frog comes to eat you, that's kind of your exit you're aiming for. Okay, so that's your trade sale. Dragonfly I had to put as logistics, the sun are the investors, so the ecosystem relies ultimately on the sun, so we need some money coming in as we grow. The weed is where everybody likes to congregate, so that's the networks, the kiln, if you like. And the snail was a bit of a difficult one, so I decided it was sort of the county councils. So I've now just got a couple of slides to show you some of the things that we've been doing in Malvern. So the Innovation Centre is not a glitzy glass facaded mirrored building, but it's where we've set up some shared space, some offices. We're based there, and we've tried to turn it into a little microcosm of activity to promote entrepreneurship. So it's at the top of the Malvern Hills, and it's about 7,400 square feet. We've got about 12, depends how you count, offices and 14 hot desks. The reason I think it works is that in Malvern there are some of the things I've already talked about. So it was a pioneer in this case, private education, also in health and tourism. When I say health, actually health tourism, because people went to Malvern to partake the waters, and so the water cure is an early, kind of an early example of the health tourism. And of course, what's now Kinetic, but the research, the military and defence research agency that's changed over the years, developing things like radar. So despite it being a small town, there's a lot of sort of tech activity. We've got a science park, we've got grow on space in the form of the business park, so you've got a bit of an infrastructure ecosystem as well. And actually when we looked at this, it was the startup space that was lacking. So that's why we felt that if we put together the Innovation Centre, we ought to be able to fill it with small companies, or micro companies really, individuals and people wanting to grow. So that's what we've done, and in order for it to actually have a bit of a buzz and for people to want to work there, we run various events, not just ourselves but others. Another important thing is to bring in other people to do things. So we have Malvern Cybersecurity Cluster meets there once a month. One of the entrepreneurs started Malvern Monpreneurs that meets once a month. We do a technology for tourism meeting. Startup Britain Bus, we managed to get them to visit. They're actually coming to Worcester in about 2 weeks' time, middle of September, for the business festival. It's also really important to have a space to meet. So when we took over the building, it was just an industrial unit really, and what we've done is put in a cafe so that people can actually sit down, have a coffee and chat. It's very important because we don't have many other places immediately around, apart from 2 pubs, to do that sort of thing. But this is also really important because it mitigates some of the risk for us, because although we work closely with the cafe, and that's a separate thing I'm going to talk about another day, they're open on the weekends, so that brings in extra revenue, out of business hours, if you like. And because we couldn't get planning permission just for a cafe in what was quite a large unit, we also decided we'd mitigate the risk a little bit more and turn it into a visitor centre, so that there's actually a reason for people to come. And so we've used a lot of technology. We've got iPads and video walls and so on, and that's also a way of having events that are focused more at the visitors. So we can use that space in the evenings and weekends to put on fossil events and things like that, which we have done. And then another thing that I think is really important, especially in our situation where we're in a village at the top of the hill, Upper Colwell in Malvern, is to sort of engage with the local community. So there's a couple of things we've done, mainly driven through the team that run the cafe. Firstly, the cafe itself works with adults each who have a learning difficulty, and they're also really keen to do fundraising and put things back into the community. So one of the things we've got now is a defibrillator in the car park, for example, that but when we put it in, was the only one on the hills. There's a few more in West Malvern now, so it's really good. That's accessible 24/7 because it's got key code and everything. And then just recently, we've done a new initiative where you can now, with limited mobility, get to the top of Worcestershire Beacon, the highest point in Worcestershire, on the Malvern Hills, using a disability scooter, a mobility scooter, which is designed to go on all-terrain conditions, called a tramper. So that can be hired for very low cost and take you up. We do Raspberry Pi computer jams once a month. We do 2 sets, one for students after school and one for families and adults. You can come along if you want to know what one of these is. In the evenings, again, it helps us because people come and see they come and see the cafe, but they also see the hot desks and the offices. And we've had, off the back of this, people have actually moved in to use the facility. So that means that it's a good marketing exercise. But also it's obviously really important because we've got lots of school children that come up and learn about coding. And the last thing I wanted to say is, with the Which Innovation Centre, we're a tiny dot really on the hill. So we don't have a great deal of impact in the great scheme of things out of the valley and in Malvern and so on. But one of the things I think is really important is, if you're going to have an ecosystem and you're going to have activity, you need to be able to tell everybody about it and bring in fresh insights from outside. And so one of the things that we've been doing for this will be the 5th year, is organising the Malvern Festival of Innovation. And we do this in the main town, so we do it at the theatres and at the 3 counties, and it's coming up, that's the date there, 3rd to the 8th of October. The 3rd of October being the Monday evening, we're actually going to do this with the Kiln. So we've got a Kiln Festival meet-up, fuse-up, whatever you want to call it. But the other thing is we have Marcus de Sotoy coming to speak. So if you know who Marcus de Sotoy is, he's a well-known mathematician and science communicator. He's going to speak that evening and help launch the festival. And then he's going to speak the next day at our school's event. And so the message is, if you don't know about it, please look it up and please come along. Most of the tickets for most of the things are free. We've got various sponsors that help make it possible, like Kinetic. Also, if you look on the website, some of you may actually want to be involved, for example, in the school's day in terms of exhibiting and doing workshops or participating. We've got 800 students registered to attend the school's day. But the point with this is that people who come to the festival and we do a cybersecurity day, for example, which helps underpin what happens in Cyber Valley. They come from all over the country and go away and say, oh, wasn't Malvern an interesting place with lots going on? And that helps fuel the buzz. It means we get more people back each year and makes Malvern on the map in terms of cybersecurity. So I think having something like this also helps bring credibility to the initiative of creating buzz somewhere. Thank you very much.